invite back Lisa Zamoski to the stage. And this woman is not only a leading edge journalist, but as we learned earlier, Mommy of the Year. So anyway, she'll introduce Derek, and this is a great session as well. Thanks.
Okay. Hi again. Okay, great. Well, so we are here with Derek Newell, who is the CEO of Jif. And Jif, well, why don't you tell us a little bit, better coming from you than from me.
Okay. Jif is a platform that allows employers to engage the digital health ecosystem in a way that allows them to connect that to benefit design. So there's a lot of discussion, and I very much applaud all the innovation that's happening. One of the challenges of that is when you think about an employer 5 years ago, before this digital health revolution, they were having, they had maybe 10 vendors calling them with solutions around clinical or wellness or other types of solutions for consumers. And since we have had this explosion in digital health, the number of people calling them is in the hundreds. So the VP of HR now gets hundreds of calls. Every digital health startup that gets funded that can't get consumers, the VC goes, well, you should have a direct-to-employer strategy, or you should go talk to the payers, or you should go talk to the providers. The challenge is the process that was just described in the last panel is incredibly time-consuming, where it can take hundreds of hours to even vet a single vendor. So what we do is we bring 50 vendors to an employer, all plugged into the Jif platform, and allow them to select which ones they want to use and deselect them, and then we provide them a digital dashboard to see which ones are working and which ones aren't. So they can partner with hundreds of them quickly, they can implement them quickly, and we can drive consumers to them, and we take care of connecting it to their benefit design. So we take care of a lot of the plumbing, the contractual, technical, and operational complexity with the employer. We solve that for them. So.
Okay, and we should say that you partnered last year. You guys are partnered with Towers Watson to do that. Okay. Yeah. Well, so we're talking obviously about capturing consumer attention, in this case, employee attention, and obviously engaging at that point, trying to engage people. Wellness is huge for a host of reasons. Why don't we start talking about the increased intensity in this? I mean, you talk about a lot more digital organizations. There have been some different incentives made available under the Affordable Care Act. Can you just talk a little bit about what's happening in terms of trying to capture consumer attention?
I think not for the first time, but it's going to become increasingly important. It's really, really, the battle for the consumer is on, right? You see the digital health applications exploding. Google Fit comes out. Apple comes out with their health kit. All of Samsung has a huge strategy around capturing consumer data. There's this massive interest from the consumer in tracking their data. I want to be a happy, healthy person, and I'm increasingly turning to my smartphone to do that. The challenge is, how is that data going to connect to the healthcare system? Because ultimately, it doesn't connect to the healthcare system. Its value is extremely limited. And so there's a whole bunch of consumer technology companies trying to figure that out. The other thing that's happening with insurance companies is they're being disintermediated by the exchanges. So now an employer can put up a private exchange, not just a public exchange, but they can put up a private exchange instead of giving all of their employees to United Healthcare. They now say Cigna, United, Aetna, WellPoint, all of you will just compete. I'll give you a benefit design, you price it, you compete for my consumers, my employees as consumers. And that terrifies them because they can misprice the risks, they can get adversely selected against. Before, they could underwrite the whole population, and now they have to engage consumers. And so you see United partnering with people like Audax. And you see providers start taking bundled payment. They want to influence what consumers do, so they want to have an engagement. So all the time, what's happening right now is there's a massive rush to try to control the consumer interface, and especially with Jif, it's with the employers. We're trying to control the consumer interface, be the first point that they access the healthcare system, because that decision point affects so many downstream dollars. If a person goes to a physician that's a specialist versus a PCP versus they stay an extra day at home in bed, those outcomes can be really different. No judgment on whether they're good or bad, but they can be really different. So we want to control that interface.
Well, can you maybe walk us through a little bit like of an example of if I am an employee and I work for an organization that offers your platform, how is this, I mean, as you said, everybody's sort of battling for consumer attention now. That's sort of the big thing. It's, the retailing of healthcare, or just getting their attention and getting them to change their behaviors to help lower costs and get them to be healthier. I mean, what does that look like for me as the employee? I mean, can you just walk us through a little bit of an example of that?
Traditionally you would go your access to healthcare, and when you select a doctor, all that would be completely separate from, and how you select a doctor, all that would be completely separate from your employer. Once a year you would go and select your insurance design with an employer, and that is being merged, right? So the network you select, how you select, when you select, what you select, is the employers are trying to get heavily involved in that first decision-making point. Right now, what's happening is they're putting in these monolithic solutions that employees, that a health plan, if you have Aetna, you might go and select that. Now they're putting in price transparency applications. And so instead of an employer having to go out and evaluate different price transparency applications, they can select from a price transparency application that's already in the JIF platform. That price transparency doesn't have to be another vendor that's integrated into their benefit design and in their incentive structure. All that's already codified in the JIF platform. So.
Okay, I see. We talk about consumer-driven healthcare, and let's talk a little bit about what that means in the realm of technology in terms of what you guys are doing. I mean, one of the questions, I mean, in terms of controlling some of the behaviors, for example, I mean, we've seen there's been a lot of research that shows that managing diseases, once they've gotten underway, once we know somebody's sick, has been effective. Some of the wellness behaviors and trying to get people to change, how they eat or how they exercise is a little bit more questionable. Where do you see this going, and how effective do you think this will be in the long term?
Yeah, well, Jeff Clapp was up here a few minutes ago, so spent many years working with Jeff Clapp at Bosch and at Health Hero, and we designed, really Jeff designed it, I helped to sell it and to do some things with it, but it's a remote patient monitoring system, and the data we got out of that system showed that if you provide a digital feedback loop to people, you can massively change their behavior. You can and if you connect it to the healthcare system, that's the key. So the most important thing that we're doing is we don't think that we have the best ideas. We don't think that, I don't think I'm going to develop, Jif is going to develop the best blood pressure tool or application. There's 100 people, probably 1,000 people out in the ecosystem working on figuring that out. Some of them are at Mayo, some of them might be 2 gentlemen in a startup or 2 women in a startup. So what we do is we see it as providing an ecosystem to employers. So we connect those employers to the best of breed applications and allow them to offer 5 or 10 of them or 20 of them to their employees, and then we use sort of economic incentives and game mechanics to drive them into those solutions. All of those solutions are connected to our platform, and they provide us with what I call digital exhaust. We analyze that digital exhaust, and we're looking for one thing. What's the lowest cost per outcome that we're looking for? So what app, device, or service drives the lowest cost per outcome that we're looking for? So if we're looking for weight loss, which one gives it to us for the least amount of money? And the money is how much do we pay the service provider, how much do they pay Jif, and how much do we have to provide in incentives for the user? So we're betting on the ecosystem. We believe the answers are out there, but we believe this process the process that exists right now for accessing that innovation is very, very slow, very, very difficult, and a lot of good ideas are going to die on the vine. And so we're allowing companies to partner, rather than a process solution that was described before, we're a technology solution. Come partner with Jif, and we'll get you in front of 100 customers, 100 employers, which you can have them turn you on or off by the click of a button and them hitting save, and then you're integrated into their benefit design. rather than sitting through committees and sitting through an evaluation process. We take care of all that for the employer.
And it sounds like the feedback you're saying then for the employer is also pretty quick in terms of, now you talked about feedback in terms of the cost to the employer in terms of what apps or what programs are achieving results at the lowest cost. Are you looking at results, or are you looking just at the finances of it? In other words,
No,
can you
we
can
look
tell?
we collect real-time digital feedback and exhaust from every one of the partners. So for instance, take a category like blood pressure. We have a minimum set of data requirements that they need to send us. That includes the blood pressure and certain outcome measures that we have to get every time somebody interacts with the app or every time they get that data.
Okay.
We can incentivize that person to do that, but we also can, and we watch that data to see how much did the employer pay that provider. Maybe they paid them $10 a month. Maybe this one's 50 cents a month. Maybe this one drops, the blood pressure 20 points and this one drops at 5. Well, on a point, one metric is how many dollars did we pay to get a point drop in blood pressure? You can see the difference in our platform, and it's really, really clear.
So, you talked earlier about the fact that there are just, hundreds and maybe thousands of different apps and different solutions. As a small startup, I'm thinking, okay, well, it's great. I can work with you, and I can get in front of a lot of big employers. It sounds like I can die just as quickly. Is that a fair? I mean, do you think platforms like this, and maybe that's a good thing, at least for the employer, and maybe for the consumers that are using this. But I wonder if platforms like this. I don't know. What do you think about that? Am I wrong? Or?
I think we spur, what we're trying to do is solve, Jeff mentioned, and we come from the same school, you have to solve a real problem, right? And so the problem we're solving is employers have hundreds of companies calling them. They're interested in dozens of those, and they cannot partner with a dozen different companies, one in smoking cessation and two in activity tracking and one in resilience and stress and sleep. And just look what's happening in this city, in this region alone, right? And how many startups there are. And they go talk to an employer just can't deal with it. But when we come and present them with 50 or 100 different options, they can go, I want these 3, I want those 2. And some of them have chief privacy officers and chief medical officers who go, I've heard that company's really bad, take them off of my platform. So they can curate it. So I think the big risk to us is that the digital health ecosystem, our partners, don't produce the results that they say they're going to produce. That's a danger to everybody. I have data both from Health Hero and from prior experience. I think digital health is going to change the world. I think the digital feedback loop produces meaningful behavior change and meaningful results in a way that people entirely underestimate. I know one example of a company is WellDoc, right? They have a diabetes therapy management solution and did a randomized controlled trial, and it produced a better reduction in HbA1c than the leading pharmaceutical, right? And digital health is that powerful. So we believe it's going to work. That's a big risk to our partnership with our ecosystem, but if someone's not working and someone else is, the idea is for us to be able to see that and to drive more volume to that partner that's really delivering the outcomes.
So you mentioned again that there are so many different applications in the marketplace. What do you ultimately think that's the end result's going to be? What's the shakeout, I guess, of that of all these different applications?
I will be very rich if I'm right, right?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I wish I knew. I think that what's going to happen is that we're going to move from, it's going to be different for the clinical categories than for the categories that don't bump up against the FDA. So in the clinical categories, I think that it's going to be more like 4 or 5 leading competitors will emerge in each category that will have the science right and that will have the innovation right. And in each clinical category, it won't be a winner take all, but you'll end up with 3 or 4 dominant players in each category, kind of like you have with drugs, right? Because there's a process of getting through the FDA, there's a process of getting through the clinical trial, or the pilot process, or the partnership with one of the leading institutions. So, and I believe in the sort of FDA-regulated, really clinical, when you're dealing with someone who's sick, those categories will take 24 to 60 more months to mature, and there'll be 3 to 5 winners in each category. In the wellness and more sort of non-FDA, getting healthier category, I think you're going to see a very high degree of churn for for the foreseeable future, with early people who figure out consumer engagement being the winners, right? But there will always be incredible amounts of disruption in that category. I mean, look at fitness trackers and what's happening there with fitness trackers being absorbed into the phone and being absorbed into the watch and being absorbed into jewelry and being absorbed into clothing.
Right.
It's a very unstable market.
And what is your sense about that long term? I mean, is that kind of a fad? I mean, is that,
I definitely do not think fitness trackers, I don't think that monitoring and passive monitoring is a fad. That's fundamentally here to stay. Monitoring people's behavior for health, giving them feedback and influencing that behavior is here to stay. And the more passively you can monitor that, the better. So that's here to stay. The form factor, which form factor it's going to take, everybody says, when we were building the Health Buddy and the smartphone came along, Jeff and I are sitting there talking and we're like, we're not going to need this. It's all going to be on the smartphone. But that's not true, because specialized devices will be needed. So I think the generic health tracker is going to die eventually, but in the near term, millions of more people are going to buy it, because we're as a percentage of the market, it's going to decrease, but as the number of people who have an activity tracker is going to go up. So they're going to get more specialized. So they're going to get the ones that remain are going to be specialized.
when you say specialized, in other words, for
targeted for specific types of activity, specific types of users, the marathon runner, the ultra active person. And the more consumer ones are going to get absorbed into your sort of other accessories, right? So I very strongly think that activity trackers that make a fashion statement are going to be huge in the next 3 to 5 years, mm-hmm. because people want to track their activity.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't want to wear something that's quite as ugly as this, right?
Right.
They want to wear something that looks good and beautiful.
Not that I'm not saying it's ugly.
It's pretty clunky,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, they really, really want that. So I think that the people who target a certain demographic and specialize in that demographic, either from a fashion statement point of view, or from what it collects and how it collects, and it's very, very accurate for their lifestyle, mm-hmm. they're going to win. The rest of it's going to get absorbed into the phone or into a smartwatch or something.
Okay. So I guess the bigger question is, at the end of the day, all of this, particularly from the perspective, you talk about employers or health plans, or trying to shift or shape some of the behaviors of consumers as they touch the healthcare system, is ultimately about helping people become healthier, and obviously that has a huge financial impact on our healthcare system at large. Wellness programs in one form or another have proliferated, and as I said, they're being incentivized. Long term, I mean, we have all this stuff going on. We're still hugely fat as a nation, and mm-hmm. we've got a rise of lifestyle illnesses that are both killing us and killing us financially. Is this going to really make an impact? I mean, are we going to see a healthier nation 5-10 years down the line, in part because of digital advances?
I think in 10 years, yeah. I think you're going to see a significant impact on digital health. And the reason is we all have, there's been a lot of research that say social networks are positively reinforcing or negatively reinforcing. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of great startups that are working on positively reinforcing social networks that create healthy behavior change. And when those start to scale, and when we link those with benefit design and can get the consumer at the center, because it's a battle for a consumer, but we all want to control the consumer for our own interests.
Right. And
that's the challenge. Like what we really want is for the consumer to win, right? The consumer should be the center of their healthcare. They should be making the decisions, and they should have simple economics to help them make those decisions. Mm-hmm. Not, I'm a big health plan and I want to control the consumer because I wanted them to do what's in my best interest, where I have an inherent conflict of interest with them in my relationship with them, right? So that's no good either. But I think it will. I mean, I really, really believe in the power of digital feedback loops and social networks, and those two things combined to really change the outcomes of people's lives. We did a study with Lawrence Baker from Stanford on the Health Buddy, and the Health Buddy was basically an FDA-regulated fancy text messaging machine where there was a feedback loop. And we did this with Medicare, and with the folks at Stanford, it was published in Health Affairs in about 2010. And we extended people with CHF, we extended their life on average for over 2 years, which is better than most drugs, just by having just by putting a text message machine with a smart server that shot a message to their doctor when they were in trouble. And I believe, and we didn't even have the social component.
Just that
So
loop
yeah,
back.
so definitely on the chronic end of the spectrum, it's going to be massively important.
Yeah.
And I think on the healthy end of the spectrum, the social networks and the ability to track how you're doing, what your health behaviors are, and get real-time feedback loops will have an impact. I don't think we're going to see a bending of the trend in 5 years.
No.
I think it's going to take us 10 years to figure it out and get it to enough scale to bend the trend.
All right, so we'll meet back here in 10 years.
Well, let's check it out in 5.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have no. that's
29
it.
seconds
We're
left.
done. We're wrapped up. That's okay.
I'd have been slower at the end of the day. Thank you
It
very,
happens.
very much.
Okay.